OK, well, let's bring in geopolitical analyst Patrick Henningsen, who's been following this case for years, I know.
I think the important part of all of this is there has to be a level of coordination at a deeper level, a state level, between the U.S. And the UK government, both members of the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance and clearly WikiLeaks, Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Assange. Assange.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Assange.
Julian Assange.
Assange.
Julian 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 Assange.
Assange.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Assange.
The release of this video in 2010, exposing U.S. forces killing civilians in Baghdad, 2007, is what first made Assange and WikiLeaks famous.
They're 1 o'clock. Haven't seen anything since then.
Just I see your element. You got about 4 Humvees out along this. You're clear. All right, firing. Line here. When the state line. Let me know when you have it. We'll shoot. Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire.
Reuters had previously requested the footage under the Freedom of Information Act, as the dead included 2 of their journalists, but they were denied access.
Roger, we have a black SUV or bongo truck.
Bushmaster 7, Roger. This is Bushmaster 7, Roger. Engage.
1-8, engage. Clear. Come on.
311. 20.
So although WikiLeaks and Assange did publish the footage, which they got from Bradley Manning, they didn't really expose anything. The event, and the footage, were already known about.
They're going to have the IPs up. Link up us over here, break. IPs will take them up to a local hospital, over. Oh, it's their fault for bringing their kids to a battle. That's right.
For this, Bradley Manning was sentenced to 35 years in prison. But thanks to President Obama, Manning was pardoned. And became Chelsea Manning, celebrity DJ. Back to Julian Assange though, who was born in 1972. What was he doing until 2010? Well, Wikipedia actually gives a more accurate account than many sites, including most of the MSM, so let's take a look what it says. He was born Julian Paul Hawkins, 1971, in Townsville, Queensland, to Christine and Hawkins and John Shipton. The couple separated before he was born, and when Julian was a year old his mother married Brett Assange, who she divorced in 1979. Christine then became involved with Leif Mennel, also known as Leif Hamilton, whom Assange later described as a member of an Australian cult called The Family. Assange and his mother lived in more than 30 Australian towns and cities. In 1994, Assange was charged with 31 counts of crimes related to hacking, including the U.S. military, and faced a potential sentence of 290 years in prison. Instead, he struck a plea deal where he was fined $2,100 Australian dollars and released on bond. In 1997, Assange and his friend, Swalet Dreyfus, wrote a book about the exploits of several hackers. One of them was Assange, who states in an article published on the WikiLeaks website, "The book covers my case, but I deliberately minimized my role." According to Dreyfus, he co-founded a company with her and a few other computer geeks called Earthmen Technology in 1998. During this period, Assange also earned a sizable income working as a consultant for large corporations. Despite all of this, and his activism, Assange decided to go traveling. Starting in the US and Europe, he would then go hopscotching through Russia, Mongolia, and China. WikiLeaks then states, in November 1996, Assange sent an email to lists he had created and mentioned a Leaks project. Assange stated that he registered the domain leaks.org in 1999, but didn't do anything with it. So Assange registered a site for his Leaks project while traveling through Russia and China. Keep that in mind for later, it might be relevant. Wikipedia then states, that same year, while traveling the world, consulting for large corporations and registering a domain for his Leaks project, Assange found the time to investigate NSA capabilities. He discovered a patent granted to the National Security Agency in August 1999 for voice data harvesting technology and said, "This patent should worry people." Everyone's overseas phone calls are or may soon be tapped, transcribed and archived in the bowels of an unaccountable foreign spy agency. He found this NSA patent while traveling through Russia and China. This all comes from his friend, Smollett Dreyfus, writing in The Independent. It's 7 years before we get to WikiLeaks in 2006, so let's see what happens next. Well, according to Wikipedia, nothing. Looks like it's time to check some other sources. Let's start with Underground, the book Assange wrote with Dreyfus. I've already shown that he states the book is about his case, but more specifically, he uses the handle, Mendax. This handle is mentioned on his Wikipedia page with mainstream sources, but there are plenty of clues in the book. For example, Mendax's mother divorced when he was very young and she joined a traveling theater. Mendax also lived in numerous places around Australia and, like Assange, attended just as many schools. Even a Google search brings up Assange as the name behind Mendax. So with that confirmed, it makes the synopsis for Underground, originally published 1997, interesting. Assange Mendax was part of this international ring. In an interview with Assange posted on WikiLeaks, since deleted, Assange confirms the hacking group was international. So what? Well, Assange wrote in Underground that one member of the ring is a woman called Theorem, and in the late 80s she had an intimate online relationship with another member called Electron. She also dated and met with a guy called Pengo who was a member of the hacking group, Chaos Computer Club, which was, and still is, based in Germany. Pengo aka Hans Heinrich Hubner was also a friend and mentor to Electron, so obviously a part of the elite ring of international hackers, which is significant because Pengo had been involved with people who sold US military secrets, taken from computers, to the KGB according to Underground. Assange also writes that one of Pengo's associates, Hagbard, had been involved in a ring of German hackers who sold the information they found in American computers to a KGB agent in East Germany from 1986 to 1988. According to Wikipedia, Pengo and Hagbard were some of the founders of the Chaos Computer Club. So we have Assange Mendax in a ring of international hackers, at least two of which were working with the KGB, one of which was intimate with Theorem, and friend and mentor to Electron. Clifford Stoll, who worked as a system administrator at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, one of the systems hacked by Pengo and Hagbard, wrote a book in 1989 about how he used a honeypot to help identify them. In it, he states, by cooperating with the police, he, Hagbard, and Pengo avoided prosecution for espionage. Some sources state that they did serve a year in prison for hacking, but this is difficult to confirm. True or not, just like Assange, they received little or no punishment for their crimes. However, Hagbard was last seen alive on May 23, 1989. In an isolated forest outside of Hanover, police found his charred bones next to a melted can of gasoline. A borrowed car was parked nearby, keys still in the ignition. No suicide note was found. Pengo, who confessed to espionage for the KGB, currently works as a staff software engineer for Kong Inc., has previously worked for WageStream, Deloitte and many others, and co-founded DPIC, a market monitoring system in the public sector. Returning to Assange, remember earlier we had Wikipedia telling us about him hopscotching through Russia and China? Well, in his autobiography, Assange provides some details. And during the Assange interview posted on WikiLeaks he gives more confirmation he was in Russia. He also seems very knowledgeable about how the country works. When I was in Russia in the 1990s, I used to watch TV in Moscow. At that time, Russia had something like 10 independent points of power. It had the army. It had the remnants of the KGB and the external KGB, which ended up becoming the SVR. It had Yeltsin, and his daughter, and that mob. It had some broader mishmash of bureaucracy that was left over from the Soviet Union. And it had 7 oligarchs. That meant, in terms of media control, the state plus the oligarchs with their own independent media. And when Putin came in, he tamed the oligarchs. The result was that they fell in under Putin's centralized patronage pyramid. The ownership of the TV stations also reigned popular democracy under Putin's pyramid. And now, in order to get anything of scale done in Russia, you have to have a sponsor in the pyramid. He also reveals he's quite the Russophile. As for inspirational texts, well, there isn't one in particular. But when I was in prison, I read Cancer Ward by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and I've been a long-term appreciator of Solzhenitsyn and other Russian literature. Who else besides Solzhenitsyn? Tolstoy? Oh, Pasternak and Dostoevsky, and yes, Tolstoy when I was younger, and Bulgakov, though he's Ukrainian who wrote in Russian. I'm very fond of Russian children's cartoons from the 1970s and 80s. These cartoons embody the highest representation of childhood and beauty and innocence and curiosity, all together. This is terribly underappreciated in Western society in this particular period. For something that I find beautiful, this is what comes to mind instantly. Everything else that Assange did during this time is mostly a mystery, until he launches WikiLeaks in Iceland, October 2006. The first leak was just 2 months later in December 2006. Its authenticity hadn't been determined and no one really cared about it. And it didn't take long for the controversy to start. In 2007, John Young, one of WikiLeaks' early founders, left the organization reportedly because he said they were a CIA conduit and linked to George Soros. Young denied this. He said his claim was only that they were acting like they were and released emails to prove this. The emails are inconclusive either way, but there are a couple of interesting ones from John Young. Soros will kick you out of the office with such overreaching. WikiLeaks is a fraud. Fuck your cute hustle and disinformation campaign against legitimate dissent. Same old shit, working for the enemy. The Soros he's referring to is George Soros of the Open Society Foundation. In a 2009 interview with Wired.com, the WikiLeaks spokesman, Daniel Schmidt, real name Daniel Domskyberg, says that WikiLeaks has fed the speculation that it is CIA funded. There's nothing better than half of the world thinking we are CIA, says Schmidt. In his book, Inside WikiLeaks, My Time with Julian Assange, Daniel says he first met Assange in December 2007 at a Chaos Computer Club conference in Berlin. That's the Chaos Computer Club linked to KGB espionage. Then, after the 2008 conference, Assange lived with Daniel in Wiesbaden for 2 months and he refers to Assange as his lovable friend. In the spring of 2007, Assange was in Paris working on WikiLeaks. His girlfriend spoke Russian and would sometimes lend a hand with that. Why does Assange need someone who can speak Russian to help him with WikiLeaks? Around the time Assange was living with Daniel in late 2008, WikiLeaks got its first real attention when it published the BNP membership list including names, addresses, phone numbers and emails. Then in November 2009, when more than 1,000 emails sent between staff at the University of East Anglia's Climate Research Unit appeared to show that scientists distorted research to boost their argument that global warming was man-made, causing an international media storm.
Now, a video has been released on the internet purporting to show US military personnel firing at civilians in a Baghdad square in 2007. 2 journalists, one journalist, Reuters journalist, and his driver were killed in that attack. This video has just been released by the online whistleblower WikiLeaks. We can now speak to a member of WikiLeaks. Joining us from Washington is the editor of wikileaks.org, Julian Assange. Thank you very much for joining us. So first of all, take us through what exactly, in a nutshell, what this video shows.
This is a video of an Apache helicopter attack on the 12th of July 2007 in the Iraqi suburb of New Baghdad. It shows a number of things. It shows an attack on a group of people, 2 of which are Reuters journalists from Baghdad.
I first heard about WikiLeaks and Julian Assange from the helicopter footage in Iraq, the famous footage where we saw the helicopter shoot people on the ground. When someone called Julian Assange knocked on the door of the Frontline Club, I was quite pleased to see him. I was quite keen that we would have somebody who was making the news. My name's Vaughan Smith. I'm a journalist. But more, I run something called the Frontline Club, which I founded, which is a press club for journalists in London. When someone called Julian Assange knocked on the door of the Frontline Club, I was quite pleased to see him. I was quite keen that we would have somebody who was making the news. My name's Vaughan Smith. I'm a journalist, but more I run something called the Frontline Club, which I founded, which is a press club for journalists in London. It all happened in this room. I mean, Julian literally turned up and knocked on the door, and literally, unannounced, he knocked on the door 2 days before that press conference, saying, I want a press conference, I'm Julian Assange, quite literally. And so we arranged the press conference for him, and it was on a Monday morning. He was standing here, he was up here, and we had a podium. We had that podium, and we had it here, and he was standing here, and it's from this position he raised up the Guardian front page. You know, that's when the whole thing started.
So this is The Guardian from this morning, 14 pages about this topic. Also concurrently in Der Spiegel, 17 pages. We have to understand the scale of this release of information. So if we took these cables and we printed them out end to end, they would go between St. Petersburg and Moscow.
Just a couple of months after video of the Baghdad helicopter attack against civilians was published, yet more revelations appeared. This time, it was the Afghanistan and Iraq dossiers. The Afghanistan and Iraq dossiers. Classified Pentagon files on US and Allied military activity in Afghanistan and Iraq from 2004 to 2009.
These were logs that were written by members of the military who might be out at the front or patrolling an area, and might be things they've seen or something they experienced on their shift or patrol.
I'm John Kiriakou, and you're watching The Whistleblowers. Most people have never heard of the Australia-based non-governmental organization Blueprint for Free Speech. Blueprint for Free Speech was founded in 2014 by Dr. Sulet Dreyfus, and it almost immediately became one of the most important repositories in the world for research, draft legislation, and international activism on behalf of whistleblowers. Blueprint for Free Speech is responsible for successful whistleblower protection legislation in countries all around the world, and it works closely with other whistleblower organizations and with governments to tailor that legislation to each locale. We're happy to be joined by the Executive Director and founder of Blueprint for Free Speech, Dr. Sulet Dreyfus. Dr. Dreyfus's career has spanned academia, journalism, and advocacy. She's a specialist in cybersecurity technologies and in integrity systems that work as corrective mechanisms in society. Her work at Blueprint has been to improve the standards of laws and practices all around the world that protect freedom of expression. And she has raised the standards for whistleblower protection everywhere. She also works on projects to protect the media's ability to publish freely, particularly via the internet, and on the creation of new technologies to achieve those goals. Welcome, Dr. Sulet Dreyfus. Let's start at the beginning. You've been interested in whistleblower and free speech issues for a long time. You were even one of the co-founders of WikiLeaks with Julian Assange. I'm proud to say that I've been associated with you and with Blueprint since 2015, and that we did some good work together getting a new whistleblower protection law passed in Greece.
He was also required to remain at the country house owned by a close friend, the British journalist Vaughan Smith.
Well, I'm now sitting in a chair in my drawing room in Ellingham Hall. It's a sort of house that is the product of wealth that my family has generated for hundreds of years. My family moved here in 1795, and I'm fortunate to have that responsibility to look after it.
Boone Smith is an investigative journalist and also war journalist who kindly offered this very big, secure place to be the place from where the publications will be made. Do you feel safe here?
I feel as safe as one can be. Yes, it's always a bit safer. Would feel much safer if I was here and no one knew I was here. But as far as the building and grounds is concerned, this is about as good as you get.
WikiLeaks basically turned this into their office for quite a while. So you would have come in here and you'd have found people working on computers, bits of paper, printouts everywhere, running around with these little discs and things like this. So that involved having Julian, it involved having the people that work for him, it involved having everybody who wanted to interview him. But this was the main office, this was WikiLeaks headquarters.
That is the place where a lot of work later down the road also came to happen. But I would say that the big publications of Cablegate, they were conducted while Julian was in house arrest in Ellingham Hall.
Because it was so secret. You'd be here and you'd see people working on the computers, and you know, I wouldn't like ask because it was, you'd be looked at and they'd wonder, you'd think, oh gosh, what a silly question. Why should I ask what they'll tell me if they want to tell me. I saw them release the Afghan war logs. I saw them working on the diplomatic papers, and I saw them working on some stuff that came afterwards when they were here. It's interesting how it's very hard to stop organizations like WikiLeaks, and that WikiLeaks isn't going to be the end of it, even if WikiLeaks disappears, which there's no sign that it will. It's become a sort of guerrilla organization for freedom of speech. I first heard that Julian was in the Ecuadorian embassy the morning after he went to that embassy, because I read it in the news and realized that I'd just lost my bail money.
Thank you. Now we move on to the next question. Could you introduce yourself and speak into the camera so we can see you?
My name's Stian, and I'm just wondering, you mentioned the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Since we are now living in the wake of consequences of 9/11, do you feel now, with the media failing us, that we need a new investigation of 9/11? Thank you.
It's an interesting question. The original investigation of 9/11 was, of course, you can see from which documents were restricted, compromised by the United States diplomatic and power sensitivities concerning the role of Saudi Arabia, perhaps to a degree, the role of a couple of other states. But I don't think, yeah, I mean, obviously all these things should be investigated. It's quite interesting to see after 50 years, new JFK documents coming out. There's not so much interest there directly concerning the murder, but the geopolitical environment, the attempts by the United States to assassinate other people, for example, yeah, is quite revealing. On the 9/11 issue generally, yeah, I don't think it is particularly important in the sense that every day or every few weeks, WikiLeaks and some other publishers publish proof of very serious existing conspiracies that are happening right now or just a couple of years ago in order to start wars or steal billions of dollars. These things, I think, can have more of a change. There's a certain view in relation to 9/11 that it's some kind of holy grail that would shake the existing order of things. I don't think it would, even if it came out that there were some rogue agents involved. And that's how it would be positioned, no matter who it was.
Back in 2010, Assange wasn't just dismissing conspiracies around 9/11 while at the Frontline Club, he was also trying to get a visa to Russia so he could avoid a rape trial. I, Julian Assange, hereby grant full authority to my friend, Israel Shamir, to both drop off and collect my passport, in order to get a visa, at the Russian consulate, London. The visa was approved, but too late. AP said they confirmed the authenticity of the document by running it by 5 former WikiLeaks associates. Shamir told the AP he was plagued by memory problems and couldn't remember delivering Assange's letter or say whether he eventually got the visa on Assange's behalf. I can't possibly exclude that it happened, Shamir said in a telephone interview. I have a very vague memory of those things. Shamir's memory appeared sharper during a 2011 interview with Russian news service Radio. Shamir said he'd personally brokered a Russian visa for Assange, but that it had come too late to rescue him from the sex crimes investigation. Russia would be one of those places where he and his organization would be comfortable operating, Shamir explained. Asked if Assange had friends in the Kremlin, Shamir smiled and said, "Let's hope that's the case." But who is Assange's forgetful friend, Israel Shamir? Let's take a quick look. Israel Shamir was born in Novosibirsk, Siberia, Russia, and is currently best known as a far-right anti-Semitic Holocaust denier. The bio on his own website states, among other things, that he moved to Israel in 1969, served in the IDF during the Yom Kippur War and then moved to London in 1975 to work for the BBC. In 1980 he worked for the Israeli newspaper, Haaretz, and was Knesset spokesman for the Mapam party. He has also translated the works of Shai Agnon from Hebrew to Russian and in 2004 converted to Christianity. What his bio doesn't tell you is that his real name is Israel Schmerler, and according to his own mother, Esther Schmerler-Lombowski, he was a Zionist when he was younger. She says she belongs to the Homeland Movement from the day it was founded. I am a settler, the issue of Israel is difficult for me. As a mother, I prefer not to add. He received a Zionist education. He was a Zionist activist. He did great things. Shamir also doesn't mention that the Mapam party is Marxist-Zionist. The name Mapam comes from Mifleget Hapolim HaMuhedet, which literally means United Workers' Party. He also doesn't mention that he was later a member of Florian Geyer, which is described as an extreme right-wing party in Russia that was founded by Alexander Dugin. To complete Shamir's apparent conversion from far-left Zionist to far-right Christian, he was a speaker at the Zionism as the Biggest Threat to Modern Civilization conference in 2005. The conference was co-chaired by David Duke in Ukraine. In 2006, Shamir attended another conference where Duke was a speaker, this time in Iran. WikiLeaks denied that Shamir had ever had anything to do with them. But in a 2013 article in the Daily Beast, James Ball, a former WikiLeaks employee, said he knew Shamir was given access to 90,000 of the US embassy cables because he gave them to him. He also said Shamir was their representative in Russia and had ties and friends in Russian security services. Previous to this, in Daniel Schmidt's 2011 book, Inside WikiLeaks, Schmidt wrote, "I think Julian is aware of the sort of people he's associating himself with. There's been contact with Shamir, at least, for years." Given that Shamir was at Dugin's 2011 Florian Geyer conference, this puts Assange very close to a man who is very close to Dugin and David Duke. In 2004, Shamir wrote on his website, "We need the voices of David Duke, Sobran, Raimondo, Buchanan, Mahler, Nick Griffin and of other anti-bourgeois nationalists." Which is interesting, because Nick Griffin is also close to Dugin and used to write for his website. But who is this Alexander Dugin that Duke, Griffin, Shamir and therefore Assange are so close to? Well, that subject could be a video itself, so I'll keep it brief. Alexander Dugin was born into a military intelligence family in the USSR and is the founder of the National Bolshevik Party. This split to become the pro-Putin Eurasian movement, which he founded in 2001. After failing to get elected, he instead became professor at Moscow State University in 2008. Today the mainstream media calls him Putin's brain, and while this might be overstating things, at the very least he is favored by the Kremlin. The philosophy of his fourth political theory can very simply be described as, Russia and the Russian people before anything else, use any race, party or movement of any country to further this, and pogroms genocide for whites.
Was one of the things that history showed.
Kabbalah tradition is the greatest achievement of human spirit.
And there is video of him quoting Aleister Crowley, the English occultist. Dugin's interest in the occult is also evidenced in the flag of Eurasia, which is the chaos symbol.
هو عدم تدمير الاتحاد السوفيتي أو دق رقبة غورباتشوف ويلتسن في الوقت المناسب. في رأيي فإن الغرب هو مصدر الشر المطلق ويدمر الأسرة والجنس والإنسان بطبعه من خلال الذكاء الاصطناعي. أعتقد أن المسلمين يفهمونني جيدا لأنني أعتقد أن الغرب هو دجال بين.
Dugin says the West is the Antichrist due to, among other things, LGBT and the destruction of the family. This is strange given that his first wife, Debryanskaya, helped establish the gay and lesbian rights movement in Russia in the early 1990s. Despite this, and there is far more, Dugin is very popular with the alt-media, especially that which claims to be on the right, most of which support Assange. Why is this? And why is Assange so close to Shamir, who is clearly close to Dugin?
I'm Julian Assange.
Roger, I'll get you into strength.
Editor of WikiLeaks. We've exposed the world's secrets.
These documents belong to the United States government.
Been attacked by the powerful.
The United States strongly condemns.
Hey, quit asking questions. He broke the law.
Illegally shoot the son of a.
For 500 days now, I've been detained without charge. But that hasn't stopped us. Today, we're on a quest for revolutionary ideas that can change the world tomorrow.
While confined to the Ecuadorian embassy from 2012 so he could avoid trial, Assange still managed to present his own show on Russian state TV channel, RT. I wonder who helped set that up for him. Like everything to do with Assange, even his show doesn't quite make sense. Let's listen to a bit of the intro again.
For 500 days now, I've been detained without charge.
Assange says he's been detained for 500 days, which means he must have filmed his RT show from the embassy. And this is what's claimed if you search online. But what's it like at the embassy?
And if he steps out, he won't be arrested by British police.
Well, this is the Ecuadorian embassy where Julian Assange lived for nearly 7 years. The embassy is only the one of the two flats in the first floor. So what you are looking at is at the balcony, the only balcony that the embassy has, which in fact was Julian's room in the last 5 years. The building is surrounded by high buildings, which does not allow for the sunlight to come into the embassy. Julian compared his stay at the embassy to be living in a spaceship because he was subjected only to artificial light.
So to recap, the embassy is on the first floor, there is only one balcony. The building is surrounded by high buildings so there's no sunlight, and Assange said it was like living in a spaceship because there was only artificial light. Sounds awful. It must have been hard living there. As for filming a show?
A furious war over the future of our societies is underway. To most, this war is in.
That doesn't look like a flat with a balcony surrounded by high buildings so there's no sunlight. And where did the garden come from? So where was it filmed? Was it here? At Von Smith's mansion? But I thought Assange couldn't leave the embassy. Ah, well, I'm sure it's not important, so let's not think about it and instead take a look at the show. The Julian Assange Show, aka The World Tomorrow, lasted just 12 episodes, and each week he would interview different guests. In the episode I've already shown, he interviews some hackers.
A furious war over the future of our societies is underway. To most, this war is invisible. On the one side, a network of governments and corporations that spy on everything we do. On the other, the cypherpunks, virtuoso geek activists who make codes and shake public policy. This is the movement which spawned WikiLeaks. I am joined by 3 cypherpunk friends. From Germany, Andy Muller-Magoon. From France, Jeremy Zimmerman. And from the United States, Jake Applebaum.
Assange says he is joined by 3 cypherpunk friends. I wonder if we'll find anything interesting if we take a look at them. Again, we can use Assange as the source. This time his 2016 book, Cypherpunks. Jacob Applebaum is a member of the Chaos Computer Club, and Andy Muller-Magoon is a longtime member, former board member and spokesman. Jeremy Zimmerman isn't officially a member of the Chaos Computer Club, but according to The Independent he did attend Hacking Woodstock in 2011. The fact it was held at a former Soviet base doesn't mean anything. Jacob Applebaum is Jewish and, according to a 2010 Rolling Stone article, he identifies as queer and likes dressing in drag. Accusations of sexual misconduct, including rape, started in 2015, and Applebaum was removed from several organizations that he was involved with, including Tor and the Chaos Computer Club. The German newspaper, Süddeutsche, said the rape allegations had been circulating for years. Andy Muller-Magoon has been a member of the Chaos Computer Club since 1986, according to German newspaper, Computerwoche. And a 2018 Washington Post interview says his relationship with Assange goes back to the 1980s, when his walk to school took him past the offices of the Chaos Computer Club. So that's further confirmation Assange was a member of the club when his friends were also members and working for the KGB. The same article also mentions Mueller's role in the 2016 Democratic National Committee email hack, which was published by WikiLeaks. It further damaged Hillary Clinton's already woeful run for president and handed it to Trump. It is alleged that Mueller delivered the information to Assange on a USB stick during one of his monthly visits to the Ecuadorian embassy.
Often it's the case that we have to do a lot of exploration and marketing of the material we publish ourselves to get a big political impact for it. But in this case, we knew, because of the pending DNC, because of the degree of interest in the US election, we didn't need to establish partnerships with the New York Times or the Washington Post.
Incidentally, another potential source of the information was Nigel Farage.
Yeah, I've met Julian Assange. I went to see him in the embassy a few years ago.
But why would Farage be involved? Mueller is also on the board of the Wow Holland Foundation, which was started after the founder of the Chaos Computer Club died, and it provides support for WikiLeaks releases. Not that they need it, given in 2018 they had $25 million in virtually untraceable Bitcoin. Mueller's consulting and advocacy work has carried him all over the world, including Moscow, where in 2016 and 2017 he attended a security conference organized by the Russian Defense Ministry. Since 2018, Mueller says he runs a data center that hosts websites and manages email for businesses. He also works as a security consultant, helping companies and governments safeguard their secrets. One of his clients is in China. I'll let our old friend, Vaughn Smith, have the last word on it.
Lots of people I meet believe that Julian Assange delivered us Trump. And that came from the fact that he put into the public domain some what are called the DNC leaks. Basically, they were emails from the Democratic Party. We've learned about something called Guccifer 2.0 and various other DC leaks and various other memes which are supposed to convince us that this information was from Russia. Well, I don't know. I don't know whether it was from Russia. I don't know where Julian got the leaks. Julian hasn't told me. Julian says it wasn't.
Well, it's not like there's any other evidence Julian has links to Russia. A 2017 U.S. intelligence report stated that RT's editor-in-chief visited Assange at the embassy in August 2013 to discuss renewing his contract with RT. RT's editor-in-chief has always been Margarita Simonyan, who got the job aged just 25 after working as a correspondent for the Kremlin press pool, because she is well connected. Do you remember what Assange said earlier? Everything in Russia is under Putin's pyramid and nothing gets done unless you have a sponsor. Does that include having a TV show on Russia's flagship state news channel? Is the well-connected Margarita Simonyan Assange sponsor in Putin's pyramid? 2013 is also the year that Edward Snowden became famous. After leaving the US in May, he met with, among others, Glenn Greenwald in Hong Kong to give him the first of what would result in over 1 million NSA and Department of Defense files, before ending up in Russia. But he didn't do this without help. In a 2015 interview with Democracy Now!, Assange admits WikiLeaks got Snowden out of Hong Kong and into Russia, claiming the plan was to get him to Latin America. He was escorted by WikiLeaks investigative editor, Sarah Harrison. Assange also says he advised Edward Snowden he would be safest in Russia. Snowden, however, didn't want to be accused of being some kind of spy. WikiLeaks was quite open about its involvement at the time. And this tweet is still on WikiLeaks' account. In another Democracy Now! Interview, 2014, we learned Sarah Harrison stayed in Moscow airport with Snowden for 39 days, followed by another 3 months in Moscow itself.
Well, we turn now to a Democracy Now! Global broadcast exclusive. We're joined here in Bonn, Germany by Sarah Harrison of WikiLeaks, who accompanied Edward Snowden on his flight from Hong Kong to Moscow last June. She spent 39 days with Snowden in the transit zone of an airport in Moscow while she assisted in his legal application to 21 countries for asylum. Sarah Harrison then remained with Snowden for about 3 more months after Russia granted him temporary asylum. Sarah Harrison is investigative editor of WikiLeaks and acting director of the newly formed Courage Foundation. We welcome you to Democracy Now! And thanks so much for doing this interview. You're living in Berlin, Germany right now.
Instead of now asking questions from the audience, because we have too less time, who would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, we have like this one problem. We have this witness who didn't come to the committee. And we would like to be able to ask him questions, because we have to ask him questions, because he's the #1 witness who started all this. And so we have to ask, like, what do you think about what happened in Germany after, like, all those, like, committee things were coming out and, like...
Come on up! Stand up! Give him standing ovations!
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you so much. But I got to say, this is CCC. You know, we're always killed for time.
Andy Muller-McGunn, longtime member of the Chaos Computer Club, former board member and spokesman, supports Snowden. He also worked at The Intercept with Glenn Greenwald, which explains why Greenwald was one of the chosen few who went to Hong Kong for the Snowden leaks. Okay, so Snowden was helped by WikiLeaks, advised by Assange, escaped to Russia, supported by Mueller of the KGB-linked Chaos Computer Club, and was a guest at their conference where he received a standing ovation, but that doesn't mean anything.
Thank you. We've got a really sensational, really outrageous, I would say, video message from a person who received, who actually revolutionized the world by revealing the, by leaking the information
I'd like to ask you a question
about American Secret Services, Edward Snowden.
And the bulk collection of private records. So I'd like to ask you, does Russia intercept, store, or analyze in any way the communications of millions of individuals? And do you believe that simply increasing the effectiveness of intelligence or law enforcement investigations can justify placing societies rather than subjects under surveillance? Thank you.
Mr. Snowden, you are a former agent, a spy.
Did Putin just say Snowden was a spy?
Mr. Snowden, you are a former agent, a spy.
A WikiLeaks, Assange, Chaos Computer Club linked spy for who? In 2022, Edward Snowden became a Russian citizen after living there since 2013. 4 years later, 2017, and still in the Ecuadorian embassy, Assange was reportedly granted Ecuadorian citizenship so that he could become political counselor to the country's embassy in Moscow, which he would have been able to travel to without fear of arrest due to diplomatic immunity. Russia called the story fake news, but the Ecuadorian opposition lawmaker, Paula Vintimilla, who opposes her government's decision to grant Assange nationality, released government files to prove it. Legal opinion issued to the Vice Minister of Human Mobility, José Luis Jacome Guerrero. The opinion states that there is sufficient legal basis that supports the decision to grant a letter of Ecuadorian naturalization to Mr. Julian Assange since he is a person who, for extraordinary reasons, has remained in legal status of political asylum for more than 5 years in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, that is, under the jurisdiction of Ecuador. Here it is confirmed that Assange would have been appointed as a diplomat at the embassy in Moscow. Through ministerial agreement, Byron Rolando Suarez declared the nullity of the administrative act by which Mr. Assange was appointed as a diplomat at the embassy in Moscow. Predictably, the UK vetoed the application for Assange to get diplomatic status. With note number 011/2012 of August 23, 2012, the British Foreign Ministry indicated with respect to diplomatic asylum and the request for safe passage in favour of Mr. Julian Assange, that given that the United Kingdom is not a party to the Convention of Caracas on Diplomatic Asylum, 1954, there is no legal basis to accept Ecuador's request. The Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs of the United Kingdom reported that Great Britain did not recognise the request for diplomatic asylum. The position of the United Kingdom on Mr. Assange's situation is not to recognize his asylum status. And unfortunately for Assange, his stay at the Ecuadorian embassy ended in April 2019, when Ecuador decided he was no longer welcome. So yet another attempt to flee to Russia failed. That was Assange being removed from the embassy, but did you notice? BBC News claims the video. But they got it from Ruptly, which is a subsidiary of RT. Ruptly is coincidentally based in Berlin. And who's this taking the video? The Frontline Club's Von Smith? But why did the Ecuadorian government, after putting up with Assange for 7 years and trying so hard to get him to Moscow, suddenly decide they wanted him out? When Assange first entered the embassy in 2012, the president of Ecuador was Rafael Correa, a socialist who reduced his country's reliance on the IMF and World Bank. Instead he allied with other socialist, South American countries. He also met with Russian President Medvedev in 2009, where they spoke in favor of a multipolar world, signed a declaration on strategic partnership and various contracts including military and energy. In 2013 he went to Moscow to meet President Putin and, among other things, sign more trade agreements and take out a loan. Putin said Ecuador was one of our most important Latin American partners. Iran's President Ahmadinejad was guest of honor at Korea's inauguration. Korea's approach to the United States was described as confrontational. Hardly surprising that Ecuador helped Assange, and therefore WikiLeaks, given that the majority of their leaks are against the US government. And since 2018, former President Correa has had his own show on RT. despite now living in Belgium so he can avoid being extradited back to Ecuador to serve an 8-year sentence for corruption.
Buenos días. Ecuador es un país generoso y de brazos abiertos. El nuestro es un gobierno respetuoso de los principios del derecho internacional, entre ellos la institución del asilo. El concederlo o retirarlo es facultad soberana del Estado ecuatoriano. Hoy anuncio que la conducta irrespetuosa y agresiva del señor Julian Assange, las declaraciones descorteses y amenazantes de su organización aliada en contra del Ecuador y sobre todo la transgresión de los convenios internacionales han llevado la situación a un punto en que el asilo del señor Assange es insostenible e inviable. Ecuador, soberanamente, da por finalizado el asilo diplomático otorgado al señor Assange en el año 2012.
Was Assange's discourteous and aggressive behavior the real reason his diplomatic asylum was terminated and he was kicked out of the embassy by the new president? In contrast to the anti-West, pro-Russian Korea, President Moreno was more US-centric. In 2019 he obtained a loan of more than $10 billion from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank and allowed the US military to use the airbase on the Galapagos Islands. He also sacked 10,000 healthcare workers as part of austerity measures recommended by the IMF. The following year he decreed a state of emergency when the World Health Organization, WHO, declared a pandemic. In 2018, Vice President Pence met with Moreno who agreed to purchase military equipment and helicopters. They also discussed Assange. The following month Moreno withdrew from their socialist alliances in South America, including Cuba and Venezuela. In 2019, a dossier anonymously sent to Moreno's opposition implicated him and his family in alleged crimes of corruption, perjury and money laundering, as well as linking him to Chinese company, Sinohydro. Moreno claims WikiLeaks were involved with providing information for the dossier. I wonder where they got it from. After Assange's removal from the embassy, which now makes a lot more sense, he was sent to Belmarsh High Security Prison.
Belmarsh prison is said to be a worse place even than Guantanamo.
He is denied the right of fraternizing with other prisoners. He told me that when he sees people go past his cell, he wished he could speak to them.
I saw those leaked videos where he appears to have lost a lot of weight. When I saw that, I really started crying, because when you know someone very well and see him in this position,
you're not allowed to hand him anything. The only way of communicating with the outside world is for him to receive letters.
Belmarsh prison is said to be a worse place even than Guantanamo.
He is denied the right of fraternizing with other prisoners. He told me that when he sees people go past his cell, he wished he could speak to them.
I saw those leaked videos where he appears to have lost a lot of weight. When I saw that, I really started crying, because when you know someone very well and see him in this position,
you're not allowed to hand him anything. The only way of communicating with the outside world is for him to receive letters.
Angela Richter is a theater director living in Berlin, who has done work with, and about, activists such as Assange and Snowden, who she visited in Moscow. She contributes articles and interviews to various publications, including Der Spiegel and Der Freitag. She really should have a better idea what Guantanamo and Belmarsh are like. Mary Kostakidis is a former mainstream news reader who has since turned her attention to Assange, George Galloway for Prime Minister, and Russia. So she's totally impartial. John Pilger was a former mainstream journalist who worked for the Daily Mirror under Robert Maxwell and then Piers Morgan. He was at The Guardian until 2019, a regular on RT, and had a history of making anti-US UK documentaries. Definitely not naive, and all of them definitely know better. Let's continue.
We were not sure if he wanted to communicate with journalists. But here's a letter we've just received from Belmarsh prison, and it's from Julian Assange, as it says here on the back.
That letter reveals despair and frustration as the trial draws closer. The WikiLeaks founder says he has no internet or telephone access, which seriously hinders his ability to prepare his own defense, and that he has nothing much to do except walk thousands of laps per day around the cell.
It's very distressing to see someone you have worked with and who is an old friend in such peril, personal peril.
Things are so perilous in Belmarsh for Assange. He was allowed to get married there. To Stella, which, as you should expect now, isn't her real name. Her real name is Sarah Devant, but she changed it to Stella Morris, then Stella Morris Smith Robertson, despite never being married. The two children are Julian's and Stella's, and they were conceived in the Ecuadorian embassy in 2016 and 2019. Obviously, there isn't anything else to comment on regarding the life of Sarah Devant Stella Morris Smith Robertson Assange. Stella was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, to a Spanish mother and a Swedish father of Cuban heritage. Both parents were involved with the anti-apartheid movement. When not working hard to prevent Assange facing trial for rape, Stella writes for New Internationalist, a left-wing, libertarian socialist magazine which also produces works for the United Nations, for which they have won awards. Peter Tatchell, LGBTQ rights campaigner and pedophile apologist, is quoted on their website as a fan. Being an anti-establishment father with two young children but marrying a woman who works for the UN and quotes Peter Tatchell on her website might seem a bit strange to some, but in the world of Assange WikiLeaks, it's apparently fine. Given that the WikiLeaks source for the Vault 7 leak that Assange was happy to promote in 2017, Joshua Schult, was convicted of possessing and distributing images of bestiality and rape of children as young as 2 years old, it's not really surprising.
Criminal investigation is underway in the US following the leak of thousands of classified CIA documents by the website WikiLeaks. The material reveals the hacking tools said to be used by the CIA. It includes details on how devices such as mobile phones and smart TVs are being used to spy on people around the world. Officials have told reporters they believe the leaked documents are largely genuine. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange criticized the CIA for keeping the data in one place, calling it incompetent. He also says his group is willing to work with tech companies to help defend themselves against hackers.
Protection against nation-state cyber attacks requires the active assistance of technology companies and companies like WikiLeaks, which can provide information about these attacks. The tech sector plays a unique role in the as the internet's first responders, and we therefore should commit ourselves to a collective action which will make the internet a safer place.
Obviously WikiLeaks, Assange, and his crack team of cypherpunks couldn't be expected to know what someone might be doing with their computers, especially when they provide another leak against the US government. Assange's stay at Belmarsh isn't some random injustice as he and WikiLeaks would have you believe, it's for breaching his bail conditions regarding the rape charges, for which he was sentenced to 50 weeks. These charges were dropped in November 2019, which means there'll now be no competing extradition request to the one from the US. Having served his 50-week sentence, Assange remains in Belmarsh as he continues to appeal his extradition to the US after being indicted in May 2019 and June 2020. Again, contrary to what WikiLeaks and his supporters would have you believe, even his own lawyer didn't bother to apply for bail on his behalf as he has such a history of absconding. In 2020, Assange even tried to use fear of contracting COVID as a reason for his release, but unconvinced, the judge noted his past comments where he said he would rather commit suicide than face extradition to the US. The two indictments against Assange aren't just for publishing, again as WikiLeaks would have you believe, they include espionage, hacking and for helping Snowden escape the US, which he is on record admitting. The indictment also specifically mentions the Chaos Computer Club, claiming Assange gave a presentation at their 26th annual conference in 2009, 26C3.
Yes, my name is Daniel Schmidt, this is Julian Assange. We're here to make a short presentation about the WikiLeaks project. Thanks.
Currently, May 2024, Assange is in Belmarsh still appealing extradition, and he, WikiLeaks and his supporters will still tell you he has committed no crimes and is just a persecuted journalist who publishes leaks. But if you recognize the name, Philip Agee, you'll realize we might have been here before. Philip Agee was a CIA case officer who, from the early 1970s, leaked classified information in books and magazines, Covert Action Information Bulletin and Counterspy. He disclosed covert CIA operations in Latin America, including the identities of 250 of its undercover officers, and the names of individuals recruited as informants. Like Assange, he hid behind First Amendment protection. In 1975, while sheltering in London, he wrote, Inside the Company, where he admits that representatives of the Communist Party of Cuba encouraged him to continue. Agee was deported from the UK in 1977 and subsequently deported from various European countries. At one point he had a Nicaraguan passport thanks to the left-wing Sandinista government, before settling in Germany and Cuba. Like WikiLeaks, Covert Action magazine published information on the CIA that it received. Its goal was to destroy the agency and install a pro-Soviet, communist government in Washington. Former head of KGB counterintelligence, General Oleg Kalugin, said that Agee approached the KGB's resident in Mexico City and offered a treasure trove of information, but they were too suspicious to accept. Instead, Agee was welcomed by Cuba, who then shared his information with the Russians. According to Vasily Mitrokhin, KGB archivist, the KGB maintained contact with Agee through a London correspondent of the state news agency, Novosti, which was the RT of its day. According to Mitrokhin's files, KGB headquarters assembled a team to keep Covert Action supplied with material, along with Cuban intelligence, specifically designed to compromise the CIA. He also said the magazine was founded on the initiative of the KGB. In the 1980s, Daniel Brandt, founder of the Namebase database, which kept online records focusing on individuals involved in the international intelligence community, U.S. foreign policy, crime, and business, taught Agee how to use computers to do his research. Philip Agee died in a Havana hospital in 2008. His wife, Giselle Roberge, said, he was a friend of the Cuban Revolution. Granma, Cuba's Communist Party newspaper, published a small story Wednesday, describing Agee as a loyal friend of Cuba. But obviously Assange is nothing like Agee. Just ask some of the people that promote him.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
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 Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Assange.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange. Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange. Assange. Julian Assange. Julian Assange.
Assange.